The ballroom shimmered beneath crystal chandeliers, alive with applause, elegant conversation, and the quiet confidence of people who believed they had already seen every success story worth telling. Camera flashes burst across the stage as the host smiled toward the audience. And this year's Humanitarian Leadership Award goes to Ethan Carter. The room erupted. A tall man rose from his seat, buttoned his navy suit, and walked calmly toward the stage. There was no arrogance in his expression, only quiet gratitude. Business leaders stood to applaud him. Investors nodded with admiration. Reporters hurried forward, eager to capture another image of the entrepreneur whose companies had transformed thousands of lives. Then, across the crowded ballroom, one woman stopped breathing. The champagne glass slipped from her trembling fingers and shattered against the marble floor. She barely noticed. Her eyes never left the man accepting the award. No! The whisper escaped before she could stop it. It can't be him. But it was. 5 years earlier, she had walked away from Ethan without looking back. She had convinced herself he would always remain an ordinary man with impossible dreams and empty promises. She chose certainty over hope, luxury over loyalty, a billionaire over the husband who had loved her with everything he had. Now the man standing beneath the spotlight looked nothing like the broken husband she remembered. Confidence had replaced exhaustion. Peace had replaced desperation. Success surrounded him as naturally as sunlight. The audience admired the businessman they believed had always belonged among the powerful. Only she knew the truth. Only she remembered the tiny apartment, the unpaid bills, the sleepless nights, and the countless hours Ethan had spent working toward a future she had stopped believing would ever arrive. Her heartbeat pounded louder than the applause filling the ballroom. How had the man she abandoned become the most respected entrepreneur in the country? How had everything changed so completely? Ethan accepted the Crystal Award with a humble smile before his eyes drifted across the audience. For a brief moment, they met hers. He recognized her instantly. There was no anger, no bitterness, not even surprise, just a calm expression that somehow hurt more than hatred ever could. She lowered her gaze, unable to bear the silence between them. In that single glance, she realized something terrifying. The man she had once believed needed her had already built a life where she no longer belonged. And as the applause echoed through the grand ballroom, the memory she had spent 5 years trying to bury came rushing back to the day everything began to fall apart. 5 years earlier, long before photographers chased his every step, Ethan Carter was just another man trying to build a future with his own hands. Their apartment was small enough that every sound echoed through its narrow rooms. The refrigerator hummed through the night, the pipes rattled every morning, and the kitchen table doubled as both a dining room and Ethan's late-night workspace. It wasn't much, but whenever he looked at his wife, Olivia, he believed it was enough for now. He left home before sunrise and often returned long after dark. His hands carried the marks of endless work, while his tired eyes still held dreams that refused to fade. Every overtime shift, every missed weekend, every postponed vacation had a purpose. He wasn't simply earning a paycheck. He was building the life they always promised each other. "Just give me a little more time," he would say with a hopeful smile. "One day we'll look back at these years and laugh." At first, Olivia smiled back. She believed him because she loved him. But love slowly began losing its battle against unpaid bills. The stack of envelopes on the counter grew taller every month. Rent increased. The car needed repairs. Friends bought homes while they celebrated another year of simply surviving. Every postponed dream became another quiet disappointment neither of them wanted to discuss. Their conversations changed. They stopped talking about tomorrow and started worrying about next week's expenses. Silence slowly replaced laughter. Then everything shifted. At a charity fundraiser organized by one of Olivia's clients, she met Victor Langford, a billionaire whose confidence filled every room before he even spoke. He remembered names effortlessly, laughed without concern for money, and treated luxury as though it were the most natural thing in the world. Where Ethan carried exhaustion, Victor carried certainty. Where Ethan promised a better future, Victor appeared to already own it. Soon expensive flowers arrived unexpectedly. Exclusive dinner invitations followed. Designer gifts appeared with handwritten notes that made Olivia feel noticed in ways she hadn't felt for years. She insisted they were harmless. Ethan wanted to believe her. But every gift created another invisible comparison. Every glamorous evening made their modest apartment feel smaller. Every conversation with Victor made Ethan's dreams seem farther away. Without realizing it, Olivia stopped measuring her life by love and began measuring it by comfort. And once that happened, the distance between husband and wife became greater than the walls they shared, quietly leading them toward a decision that would change both their lives forever. The change didn't happen overnight. It arrived quietly, hidden behind polite smiles, late meetings, and excuses that sounded reasonable until they became impossible to ignore. Victor Langford knew exactly how to make someone feel special. Every gesture was carefully timed. A bouquet of rare flowers appeared after a difficult week. A handwritten invitation offered access to private galas where celebrities, politicians, and industry giants mingled beneath glittering chandeliers. Weekend trips aboard a luxury yacht replaced ordinary evenings at home. He never pressured Olivia. He simply showed her a world where money erased every inconvenience she had spent years accepting. At first, she insisted she was only networking. Then she stopped explaining where she had been. Ethan noticed the expensive perfume that wasn't hers, the designer handbag she claimed was a business gift, and the growing silence that filled every corner of their apartment. He wanted to ask the questions that haunted him, but fear held him back. Somewhere deep inside, he already knew the answers. One rainy evening, Olivia walked through the front door carrying 2 suitcases. Ethan looked at them for a long moment before meeting her eyes. "You've made your decision," he said quietly. She swallowed hard but nodded. "I can't keep living like this, Ethan. I want more than unpaid bills and broken promises. Victor can give me the life we've only dreamed about." He stared at the floor, listening to the rain tapping against the windows. "I never promised you luxury," he replied. "I promised I'd never stop trying." She wiped away a tear before it could fall. "Trying isn't enough anymore." The words hung in the air like a final sentence. She expected him to argue, to beg, to remind her of the vows they had made. Instead, he slowly walked to the bedroom, opened the closet, and carried her remaining suitcase to the front door. "If leaving is what you truly believe will make you happy," he said softly, "I won't stand in your way." His calmness unsettled her far more than anger ever could. For a brief second, doubt crossed her face. Then Victor's sleek black car pulled into the driveway. Its headlights reflected across the rain-soaked street like an invitation to another life. Without another word, Olivia picked up her bags and walked outside. She never looked back. Ethan stood alone as the taillights disappeared into the darkness. The silence inside the apartment felt heavier than grief itself. Neighbors whispered. Friends pitied him. Most believed his story had ended that night. They couldn't see what was happening beneath the heartbreak. Because while something precious had just been taken from him, something even stronger had quietly begun to awaken. The pain she left behind would either destroy him or become the foundation of everything that came next. The days after Olivia left became the hardest Ethan had ever known. Every morning began with silence. Every night ended with unanswered questions. Their apartment, once filled with shared dreams, now echoed with memories that refused to leave. Some evenings he sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at unpaid bills until the numbers blurred through exhausted eyes. More than once, he wondered if everyone else had been right about him all along. Life showed him no mercy. His landlord demanded overdue rent. The bank rejected his loan application without hesitation. His aging car broke down on the way to an important client meeting, costing him a contract he desperately needed. Even relatives quietly suggested he stop chasing impossible dreams and find a stable job instead. For a while, Ethan almost listened. He accepted a second job to keep the lights on while spending every spare hour studying business, leadership, and finance. The public library became his classroom. Every borrowed book filled another notebook with ideas. He refused to waste his pain. If life insisted on teaching him difficult lessons, he would learn every one of them. Finally, he launched his first company. It failed within 8 months. The product was good, but the timing was wrong. Investors disappeared. Customers never came. Ethan was forced to close the business with more debt than when he had started. The failure nearly broke him. Then came another opportunity. A charismatic investor offered to become his partner, promising capital and valuable industry connections. For the first time in years, Ethan believed things were changing. They were, just not in the way he expected. Months later, the partner vanished with company funds, leaving Ethan responsible for unpaid suppliers, legal disputes, and another mountain of debt. Friends called him naive. Critics called him finished. That night, Ethan packed every business file into a cardboard box and carried it toward the trash. He stood there for nearly a minute. Then he stopped. If he walked away now, every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every lesson bought with failure would mean nothing. He turned around. Instead of throwing the box away, he carried it back inside. Each mistake became a checklist of what never to repeat. Every rejection sharpened his judgment. Every betrayal taught him to choose character before talent. Months later, one small local manufacturer took a chance on his new consulting idea. The project wasn't glamorous, but it succeeded beyond expectations. That single client recommended another, then another. Slowly, almost invisibly, momentum replaced misfortune. Nobody celebrated those tiny victories. Nobody noticed the foundation being built beneath the surface. The world still saw a man struggling to survive. What it couldn't see was that every setback had quietly transformed Ethan into the leader he was always capable of becoming. And without realizing it, he was no longer rebuilding his old life. He was creating one far greater than the one he had lost. Time has a quiet way of revealing truths that emotions often hide. 3 years after the divorce, Ethan's life no longer revolved around surviving. It revolved around building. The small business he had started from a cramped apartment had grown into a thriving company known for honesty, innovation, and unwavering commitment to its clients. Investors who had once ignored him were now asking for meetings. Newspapers began publishing stories about the entrepreneur whose determination had turned repeated failures into remarkable success. Despite the recognition, Ethan remained the same man at heart. He greeted every employee by name, remembered where he came from, and never forgot the nights when a single unpaid bill had kept him awake until sunrise. Success had changed his circumstances, but it hadn't changed his character. Across the city, Olivia's life followed a very different path. At first, everything looked exactly as Victor had promised. Luxury cars waited outside every destination. Exotic vacations filled her social media. Expensive jewelry sparkled beneath camera flashes, and elegant parties became part of her weekly routine. To everyone watching from a distance, she seemed to be living a perfect life. But perfection can be the easiest illusion to sell. Behind the gates of Victor's mansion, affection slowly gave way to control. Every decision required his approval. Every friendship was questioned. Every appearance had to protect his carefully crafted image. The thoughtful man who had once showered her with attention became increasingly distant, treating relationships like business deals that could be managed instead of nurtured. The lavish gifts never stopped. Neither did the loneliness. For the first time, Olivia began understanding something she had never considered before. Luxury could silence financial worries, but it could never replace genuine trust. One evening, while scrolling through the news before another formal dinner she no longer wanted to attend, she noticed a familiar face. Ethan. He stood beside community leaders at the opening of a new youth education center funded by his company. There were no flashy headlines celebrating his wealth. Instead, every article praised his generosity, humility, and leadership. She stared at the photograph longer than she intended. His smile looked different, not richer, happier. It unsettled her more than any headline about his growing success. For the first time since leaving him, she wondered whether she had mistaken comfort for happiness and wealth for love. The question lingered in her mind long after she locked her phone away. And as Ethan's future continued rising beyond anyone's expectations, the glamorous life she had chosen was beginning to crack beneath the weight of everything money could never buy. By the 4th year, Ethan's company was no longer fighting to survive. It was setting new standards in an industry where integrity had become increasingly rare. Investors admired his discipline, employees trusted his leadership, and competitors respected the quiet confidence with which he conducted every business deal. Yet the achievement Ethan valued most could never be measured on a balance sheet. He had stopped living for the purpose of proving someone wrong. Instead of chasing revenge, he invested his time in people who reminded him of the man he used to be. Every month, he visited local colleges, startup incubators, and community business programs, speaking to young entrepreneurs who were struggling with rejection, debt, and self-doubt. "I didn't succeed because I avoided failure," he often told them. "I succeeded because failure eventually ran out of ways to stop me." Those words carried weight because everyone knew he had lived them. His company also launched scholarships for students from low-income families and funded training programs for small business owners who simply needed someone willing to believe in them. Ethan insisted that every success meant little unless it created opportunities for someone else. It was during one of those community programs that he first met Claire. She wasn't an executive, an investor, or someone chasing influential connections. She volunteered as a financial counselor, helping families recover after losing jobs, homes, or businesses. Compassion came naturally to her, and she listened to people with a kind of patience that couldn't be taught. Their first conversation lasted barely 10 minutes. The second stretched past an hour. Weeks later, they found themselves discussing books over coffee after another charity event. Claire knew Ethan's story, not the headlines, but the difficult years before success. She never pitied him, and she never admired him because of his wealth. She admired the man who had chosen kindness after betrayal. One rainy evening, while leaving a fundraiser together, Claire smiled and asked, "Do you ever wish your life had turned out differently?" Ethan looked at the falling rain before answering. "I used to, but if the past had been easier, I might have become a very different person. And I'm finally proud of the man I've become." Claire reached for his hand without saying another word. For the first time since his marriage ended, love didn't feel like something he had to earn. It felt safe. It felt honest. It felt like home. As their relationship quietly deepened, Ethan realized the greatest reward for surviving heartbreak wasn't wealth or recognition. It was discovering that genuine love arrives when someone values your character more than your circumstances. While his future was slowly filling with peace, somewhere across the city Olivia was beginning to watch everything she had chosen fall apart. Neither of them knew fate was already arranging one final meeting, one that would reveal just how completely their lives had changed. The applause rolled through the ballroom like distant thunder. Olivia remained frozen where she stood, unable to tear her eyes away from the man accepting the Humanitarian Leadership Award. 5 years ago, she had watched Ethan stand alone in a nearly empty apartment with nothing but broken dreams. Tonight, hundreds of the country's most influential people were standing for him. Then the master of ceremonies spoke again. "There is one more reason Mr. Ethan Carter deserves this recognition." The room fell silent. 5 years ago, Ethan Carter lost his marriage, his savings, his first business, and nearly everything he had worked for. Most people would have accepted defeat. Instead, he chose integrity over bitterness, purpose over revenge, and perseverance over self-pity. A large screen behind the stage came alive. Photographs appeared one after another. An old apartment, a tiny office with secondhand furniture, long nights spent working alone. Then the images changed. Factories, office buildings, scholarship ceremonies, families receiving the keys to new homes built through Ethan's charitable foundation. Thousands of employees celebrating another year of growth. The audience rose to its feet once again. Many wiped away tears. Olivia couldn't move. She wasn't just looking at a successful businessman. She was looking at the life she had abandoned before it had the chance to bloom. The presenter smiled before delivering the final announcement. Earlier this year, Carter Industries officially surpassed Langford Global in market value, making it one of the fastest-growing privately owned companies in the nation. The applause became deafening. Olivia felt the air leave her lungs. Langford Global, Victor's company, the empire she had believed could never be surpassed. Only she knew what the headlines didn't. Victor's reckless investments had triggered years of decline. Lawsuits, mounting debt, and broken partnerships had slowly dismantled everything that once seemed untouchable. The luxurious mansion had been sold. Private jets disappeared. Friends vanished almost as quickly as the money had. Their marriage hadn't survived the collapse. Once the fortune began disappearing, so did Victor's charm. Blame replaced affection. Control turned into cruelty. By the time their divorce was finalized, the glamorous future she had sacrificed everything for existed only in old magazine photographs. Meanwhile, Ethan stepped down from the stage and was immediately surrounded by employees, community leaders, students, and families whose lives he had changed. They weren't drawn to him because he was rich. They admired him because he had never forgotten who he was before success found him. Tears filled Olivia's eyes as a painful truth settled into her heart. Ethan had never become extraordinary because he built a fortune. He built a fortune because he had always been an extraordinary man. She had mistaken temporary wealth for permanent happiness. She had traded unwavering love for fading luxury. And now, standing only a few steps away from the husband she once called a failure, she realized the greatest mistake of her life wasn't leaving a poor man. It was walking away from the future they could have built together. The celebration continued long after the awards ceremony ended, but Olivia barely noticed the music, the laughter, or the conversation surrounding her. Her attention remained fixed on Ethan as he patiently greeted guests, thanked supporters, and spoke with the same quiet humility that had once filled their tiny apartment. When the crowd finally began to thin, she gathered the courage she had been searching for all evening. "Ethan," she called softly. He turned. For a brief moment, neither of them spoke. 5 years of memories stood silently between them. "I was hoping we could talk," she said, her voice trembling. He studied her face before giving a gentle nod. They walked onto a quiet terrace overlooking the city skyline. Below them, thousands of lights stretched across the darkness, reminding Olivia how much time had passed since the night she had walked away. She lowered her eyes. "I've rehearsed this conversation 100 times," she admitted. "But now that you're standing here, I don't know where to begin." "The truth is usually a good place," Ethan replied calmly. A tear slipped down her cheek. "I thought money would solve everything. I convinced myself that love wasn't enough, that security mattered more than loyalty. Victor gave me everything I thought I wanted, until I realized none of it could make me feel loved." She paused, struggling to steady her breathing. "I wasn't chasing him, Ethan. I was running away from fear. I was afraid we'd never escape our struggles. Instead of believing in you, I believed in someone else's wealth. It was the biggest mistake of my life." Silence settled between them. She finally looked into his eyes. "I know I don't deserve another chance. I only wanted you to know how deeply sorry I am. If there's any part of you that can forgive me..." Ethan smiled sadly. "I forgave you a long time ago." Her shoulders shook with quiet relief. "But before hope could take root," he continued, "forgiveness isn't the same as going back." She closed her eyes. "I know. The man you left behind spent years wondering why he wasn't enough. He blamed himself for everything, but somewhere along the way, he realized that another person's choices don't define his worth." His voice carried no anger, only peace. "I'll always be grateful for what our life together taught me," he said. "Without those painful years, I might never have become the person I am today." Olivia nodded through her tears. She finally understood. She wasn't speaking to the husband she had abandoned. She was speaking to a man who had rebuilt his life, healed his heart, and found a future untouched by the past. And there was nothing left for either of them to change except the way they chose to remember it. When Ethan returned to the ballroom, the evening carried on as though nothing had happened. Guests continued celebrating. Musicians filled the room with gentle melodies, and conversations flowed beneath the warm glow of crystal chandeliers. Yet inside Ethan, something had quietly settled. The final chapter of a story that had begun 5 years earlier had finally come to an end. Claire found him near the stage, holding 2 glasses of sparkling water. "I was wondering where you disappeared to," she said with a warm smile. "I needed to close an old door," Ethan replied. She didn't ask for details. She simply slipped her hand into his, trusting that whatever had happened belonged to the past. That simple gesture reminded Ethan of a lesson he had learned through years of hardship. Real love never demanded proof through wealth. It offered peace instead. Across the room, Olivia watched them together. There was no jealousy left, only understanding. For years, she had believed success was measured by expensive homes, luxury cars, and impressive bank accounts. Now she saw a different kind of success standing only a few feet away. Ethan wasn't admired because he was wealthy. He was admired because people genuinely trusted him. Employees spoke about him with gratitude. Friends laughed with him without expecting anything in return. Young entrepreneurs looked at him with hope instead of envy. His greatest achievement had never been the company he built. It was the character he refused to lose while building it. Olivia quietly walked toward the exit. Outside, the cool night air greeted her as she looked back through the ballroom windows one last time. She realized she had spent years chasing a fortune that disappeared the moment circumstances changed. The love she abandoned, however, had been priceless from the very beginning. Some losses cannot be recovered. Some choices become lifelong lessons. She accepted both with a heavy but honest heart. Inside, Ethan stepped onto the balcony with Claire beside him. The city lights stretched endlessly across the horizon, brighter than they had ever seemed during the difficult nights he once believed would never end. He smiled, not because he had become richer than Victor Langford, but because he had become richer than the man he used to be. Money had changed his lifestyle. Pain had changed his perspective. Forgiveness had set him free. And as the lights shimmered beneath the endless sky, one truth remained clearer than ever. The richest person in the room is never the one who owns the most. It is the one who refuses to lose integrity, hope, and self-respect while earning everything else. That was the fortune no one could ever take away.